The iPhone 13 came out in 2021. The iPhone 14 came out in 2022. Apple made one of the most debated product decisions in recent memory when it shipped the iPhone 14 with the same A15 Bionic chip inside the iPhone 13 rather than moving to the A16. But the chip is not the whole story, and the one thing the 14 added that the 13 will never have is the kind of feature that does not matter until it is the only thing that matters. By the end of this video, you'll know which phone makes sense for you. Both phones carry the A15 Bionic, and that single fact generated more conversation than almost any Apple product launch decision in the company's history. The framing was fair. iPhone 14 buyers were not getting the A16 that went into the iPhone 14 Pro, and the A15 was already a year old when the 14 launched. What the coverage often missed is that the A15 inside the iPhone 14 is not identical to the A15 inside the iPhone 13. The iPhone 14 version carries a 5-core GPU versus the iPhone 13's 4-core GPU, the same chip configuration that shipped in the iPhone 13 Pro. In practical daily use, that difference is not dramatic. Both phones handle everything a smartphone is asked to do in 2026 without meaningful friction. For buyers coming from an iPhone 11 or earlier, either phone feels substantially faster. For buyers deciding between these two specifically, the GPU upgrade delivers a modest but real improvement in graphics-intensive applications and sustained processing tasks. This is where this comparison becomes a genuinely different conversation than the spec sheet suggests, and it is the section that most reviews underweight. The iPhone 14 introduced emergency SOS via satellite, crash detection, and roadside assistance via satellite. These are not marketing features. Emergency SOS via satellite means that in a location with no cellular signal, a wilderness trail, a remote highway, offshore, the iPhone 14 can contact emergency services. Crash detection uses the accelerometer and gyroscope to identify a severe vehicle collision and automatically call emergency services if the user does not respond. Roadside assistance via satellite extends satellite connectivity to non-emergency breakdown situations. The iPhone 13 has none of these, and never will. Satellite emergency capability is a hardware and software infrastructure feature that cannot be added to an older device through a software update. A buyer who regularly hikes, runs trails, drives remote roads, or travels in areas where cellular coverage is unreliable is carrying meaningfully less protection with an iPhone 13 than with an iPhone 14, regardless of how similar everything else is between them. For buyers who live entirely in well-covered urban and suburban environments and never leave cellular range, this difference is academic. For buyers who ever genuinely leave coverage, intentionally or not, it is the most important distinction between these two phones. Both phones shoot 12MP dual camera systems and both produce excellent photos by any practical standard. The differences are specific and worth naming clearly. The iPhone 14's main camera lens opens to f/1.5 versus the iPhone 13's f/1.6, a wider aperture that allows slightly more light to reach the sensor in low light conditions. In dim restaurants, evening outdoor settings, and indoor scenes without artificial lighting, that marginal aperture advantage compounds with Apple's computational photography improvements to produce cleaner images with less noise than the iPhone 13 in the same scene. The iPhone 14 also introduced action mode video stabilization that handles running, cycling, and high movement shooting at 2.8K resolution at 60 frames per second. For buyers who shoot active video, sports, travel, outdoor content, action mode produces footage that previously required a gimbal to achieve. The iPhone 13 does not have action mode. The front camera upgrade on the iPhone 14 is the most visible in casual daily use. The front camera opens to f/1.9 versus the iPhone 13's f/2.2, a meaningful difference in low-light selfie quality and video call performance, and gains autofocus for the first time in an iPhone standard model front camera. Portraits in motion, moving subjects during video calls, and low-light front-facing video are all noticeably improved. The iPhone 14 rates at 20 hours of video playback against the iPhone 13's 19 hours, a 1-hour improvement that is unlikely to change anyone's daily experience in either direction. Both phones support MagSafe at 15W and fast charge that reaches 50% in 30 minutes with a 20W adapter. Neither ships with a charger in the box. For buyers whose primary battery concern is getting through a full day, both phones deliver that without requiring management. The gap between them is not a meaningful factor in this decision. Edge. Even marginal difference with no practical daily impact. Display. The display on both phones is identical in specification. 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED, 2532 by 1170 resolution, 460 pixels per inch, 800 nits typical brightness with 1200 nits HDR, True Tone, and P3 wide color. Neither phone has promotion. The 120Hz adaptive refresh rate remains exclusive to the Pro models in both generations. There is no display reason to choose one over the other. Both phones share the same physical dimensions, 5.78 by 2.82 inches, and ceramic shield front glass with a glass back and aluminum frame. IP68 water resistance to 6 meters for 30 minutes is identical. The iPhone 14 weighs slightly less at 172 grams versus 174 grams for the iPhone 13, which is not perceptible in daily use. The iPhone 14 upgrades Bluetooth from 5.0 to 5.3, a connectivity improvement that affects wireless accessory stability and range marginally. More significantly, the iPhone 14 moved to dual eSIM and dropped the physical SIM tray entirely. For most US buyers, this is invisible. Carriers have supported eSIM for years and the transition has been seamless. For international travelers who rely on physical SIM swaps for local data plans abroad, It is worth understanding before purchase, as some regions and carriers still require physical SIMs for activation. Edge. iPhone 14 on Bluetooth version. iPhone 13 Slight Edge for international travelers who need physical SIM. The iPhone 13's physical SIM tray is a genuine advantage in specific travel scenarios that the iPhone 14 eliminated. Buying a local SIM at an international airport, popping it in, and immediately having local data without carrier negotiation or eSIM configuration is a workflow that experienced travelers rely on, and the iPhone 14 ended it for US models. For a buyer who travels internationally frequently and relies on physical SIM swaps, the iPhone 13 is the more flexible device for that specific use case. The iPhone 14 is a modest generational upgrade relative to its original retail price at launch. Apple's decision to carry the A15 Bionic from the 13 into the 14, rather than introducing the A16, means buyers paid a premium for improvements that, outside of satellite connectivity and camera refinements, were incremental. That decision has aged better in the used market than it did at launch. The iPhone 14's current pricing reflects its real-world value more accurately than its 2022 retail price did. Buyers evaluating these phones at their current market prices are getting a more honest deal than buyers who bought the 14 new at launch. The Apple iPhone 14 wins this comparison, and the reasoning is specific rather than generational. Satellite emergency capability is a feature the iPhone 13 cannot add through any update. Ever. Crash detection is a passive safety layer that runs in the background of every drive and never asks anything of the user until it needs to act. The front camera autofocus and f/1.9 aperture upgrade produces meaningfully better everyday photos and video calls. Action mode delivers stabilized video that changes what casual outdoor filming looks like. And the 5-core GPU, while not a dramatic performance leap, is a real hardware upgrade at no perceptible cost in efficiency or heat. At current market pricing, roughly $199 to $550 for the iPhone 13, depending on condition and source, versus $530 to $630 new or under $300 refurbished for the iPhone 14. The right deal determines the right answer. At price parity or near it, the iPhone 14 wins without question. At a significant price gap favoring the 13, the decision depends entirely on whether satellite emergency access is relevant to your life. If you ever leave cellular coverage, the iPhone 14 safety infrastructure makes it worth paying more. If you never do, the iPhone 13 at a meaningful discount is a genuinely excellent phone that will serve its owner well. Both phones are linked in the description below. Check current pricing carefully, since both have significant variation by seller, condition, and whether they are carrier locked. If you find the iPhone 13 at a price that is genuinely meaningfully lower than the iPhone 14, the only question you need to answer is whether you ever go somewhere without cell service. If you want comparisons videos like this, hit subscribe. The iPhone 14 wins. Thanks for watching.